I find it fascinating that when I look at the back end of this podcast behind the scenes, of all the many thousands of people who listen to this show every single month, so few of them have actually hit that follow button, and even fewer have ever left us a rating or a review. If you enjoy the podcast and you get value out of it, then I would ask that you do us a solid and just take a small moment to hit that follow button. And if you want to go just one little step further, take a second to rate and review the show. It means nothing to you, but it means everything to me. And you just taking a small amount of your time to support the show is going to allow me to expand the reach of this podcast, bring it to more and more people, and continue to bring you more and more value every single week. So wherever you are right now, just take one moment, tap that follow button, and if you want to go just a little step further, leave us a rating and a review. Thank you so much for listening in and supporting the show. Thank you for being here today, and let's dive in. Hey everybody, welcome to the Conscious Love Show. Whether you are single, you are in a relationship, or you're healing a broken heart, this show is here to inspire you, to remind you how beautiful, lovable, and amazing you truly are, and to give you the practical tools and insights to navigate from wherever you are right now to the loving relationship that you so deeply want to have. My name is Shane Kohler. I'm a certified transformational coach and trainer with over a decade experience helping people release their trauma and open their hearts to love. I've delivered seminars all over the world, coached thousands of people through my online platforms and programs, and every week I'm coming straight to you with the hottest insights and the best teachers around, bringing you powerful resources and profound conversations to heal your relationship with love, dating, and yourself. I'm so grateful you're here, and if it's your first time, welcome. You can count on me to always show up for you with my very best and a commitment to learn and grow myself so I can serve you to my maximum ability. Thanks so much for tuning into the show. I've got some awesome things planned for you today. So without further ado, let's dive in. Hello, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of the Conscious Love Show podcast. Shane Kohler here with you today. Pleasure as always. Looking forward to today's episode. I have a very special guest with me. This is someone that I've followed on social media for quite some time. He's a creator and a coach and a teacher that I really admire his content, his message. So I have Trevor Hanson with me in the studio. Trevor is an internationally recognized coach and therapist dedicated to helping individuals transform anxious attachment into secure, fulfilling relationships. After overcoming his own anxious attachment, breaking his jaw, ending a toxic relationship, and leaving a corporate career at Tesla, he found his passion for helping and healing others. With a master's degree in marriage and family therapy and advanced training from some of the world's top attachment experts, Trevor has helped thousands of clients around the globe. He's been featured by the Gottman Institute and has spoken to audiences of over 10,000. As the founder of The Art of Healing, he teaches his unique method, the Secure Self Journey, to overcome attachment issues and help people all over the globe, creating lasting change and healthier relationships worldwide. So, excited to dive into today's conversation. And maybe we could start just with some of what was included in your bio, in that you healed your own attachment. You left a corporate career to pursue this. So just sounds like quite a journey there in terms of your own self-discovery and finding your passion and your purpose and making a big life transition. And so whatever you want to share, could you start us off by just telling us a little bit about your story and how you got here today?
Yeah, so I appreciate being here again. Also, thanks for having me. I will say I would never have guessed that I'd be doing this. Back when I was in my corporate job, I was working at the Tesla Gigafactory in Reno, Nevada. It's like the world's biggest building by footprint, or at least it will be when it's like fully built out. It's a mile long, half mile wide. I'm in there doing like financial kind of stuff. Like I'm a buyer for them, so I buy things, or procurement is the fancy word for it. And if you would have been like, "Hey, Trevor, in a handful of years from now, you're going to go and get a master's of marriage and family therapy. You're going to break off an engagement, and you're going to have some life altering injuries that are going to really set you on a new path, and you're going to be, helping people with like their insecurities, fears, relationships, and all of that, I'd be like, yeah, right, there's no way. How in the world am I going to get to that from where I am now? And I think the path was like a whole lot of pain, a lot of physical pain, emotional pain, a lot of challenges. I kind of needed a kick in the pants to kind of wake up to what I really needed to heal in my life and to do. And I feel like I got that kick in the pants when it came to these things. You see, like I think historically in my life, I have, if we're talking about anxious attachment, which has been mentioned a couple times already, some of the hallmarks of a person who identifies in the camp of feeling like they're anxiously attached, meaning when they are close to others or in relationships to others, that creates some anxiety. And that particular anxiety sounds like two things. One, a fear of not being good enough, kind of this sense of like low self-esteem, not really knowing if you're enough for other people. Sometimes it's a real belief that you're not good enough. Sometimes it's just a fear that you're not quite good enough. And there's maybe a slight nuanced difference. And coupled with a fear of abandonment or rejection. And so you always kind of wonder if people are really into you, if you already kind of assume that they might not be, and you feel like you got to work really hard to prove that you're enough and you're lovable. And it's so funny looking back on that story that you're talking about now. I think even the job at Tesla was an attempt to feel like I was good enough, right? Oh, this cool name, right? This big company, it's amazing. I remember feeling like a little bit of that pat on the back, right? People were excited and impressed as I came right out of school and got this job at Tesla and whatever else. But I'm realizing now in retrospect, a lot of that was an attempt to feel like I had worth and I was enough. And how it plays out in relationships is that, when you don't feel like you're worthy of love and you don't feel like you're enough, then you kind of do everything you can to manage that problem of not being enough, meaning you're going to try to control the outcomes in the relationship. You're going to try to lock down that commitment so they'll stay with you. You're going to, there's so many ways of almost trying to manipulate life to keep closeness and connection there, to keep you away from rejection and abandonment. And I got caught in that cycle, including staying in a relationship with a really unhealthy individual for some time to the point of being engaged actually, and but not willing to step out of it because I don't know if I believed that I was worth anything better, and and I was just holding on for dear life to what I thought I was worthy of, and I didn't frame it that way in my mind. I didn't realize that that was what I was doing, but looking back, it's true. Like you take what you believe that you're worthy of, and you are fearful of losing it if you're in that world of anxious attachment. So I all at the same time, those events that you listed in my bio kind of all happened at once. I was at Tesla, they had big layoffs. I got laid off as part of that group. I was dating this girl, engaged, and it kind of forced me out. Like it got so bad that it's in a way like I didn't even have a choice anymore because I wasn't choosing to leave, which would have been a better choice. But that ended around the same time, I broke my jaw and was hospitalized, and so I had no job, uh, no jaw, no fulfilling relationship, and I'd been so isolated in this relationship that I didn't have a lot of friends either. And I was like, man, I got to do something about this. Like I don't know what to do. So I signed up for therapy. I just went, and that was kind of the starting point for this healing that I've been able to accomplish for myself, and the healing that then led to me being able to help others heal in a similar way. And now it's kind of my main passion, my main focus. I've done couples therapy, I've done, grief work, I've done addiction stuff and whatnot, but I've really narrowed this focus down to making sure that I can help the people who are most similar to me in their journey. They feel this anxiety, they feel like they're not good enough, they're afraid of others leaving or being abandoned, and I'm dedicating my life to helping those people. So that's kind of a very tight little nutshell of where this all comes from.
Yeah, yeah. Thank you so much for sharing that. And something that really stood out to me as you were talking, because when we hear anxious attachment or these kinds of things, like we so quickly think about relationships, and of course it shows up in romantic relationships in particular, and of course it shows up there. But I think
Yeah.
something you illustrated was it wasn't just the relationship I was in, that was part of it, but it was like my
Oh,
whole life across the board, right? The work
yeah.
I was doing, the relationship I was in, like the even the lack of friendships that you mentioned, it was like this kind of core identity of not being enough, or the fear that
Yeah.
you're not enough had been reflected in literally every aspect of your life.
Yeah. Yeah.
And you mentioned that you were kind of forced out, right? That you didn't just,
Yeah.
you didn't just wake up one day and choose something different. What do you think would have happened if you hadn't been forced out? I'm just curious. Like, do you think you ever would have
Oh
found your
man.
way, or what do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure I would have just because um yeah, there's a tolerance that a person has for any just just chaos and pain, right? To the point where they say like, okay, I have to be done. And I think I definitely would have gotten there. Luckily, I didn't wind up like getting married or anything, and so it didn't come with all those complications. Um, and yeah, I think the pain would have gotten too great. And there's times where I even saw that. If you look back on relationships, you might think about the way you behaved under like really abnormal circumstance. If there was maybe abuse or manipulation going on in your relationship, you look at your behavior and be like, dang, that's totally not me. And you can even feel shame about it, right? I've got some of those moments from this relationship where I think back on it, I'm like, oof, that's really rough. If anybody saw that, like, man, I would be in hot water. People would feel, differently about me or something like that. And I think those moments of just like getting to that total boiling point where you're just like melting down, your very values, the very way that you want to show up in life is starting to deteriorate. I think a person can only take so much of that. And I am sure that that particular relationship would have fallen apart. I would have spent a lot more time trying to discover what I've discovered now, which is that, you know, I have great worth and value. I have a lot to offer. People are going to come and people are going to go, and that's okay. And those who are meant to be close to me will be close to me. And those who aren't, well, that's all good. We only got so much capacity to maintain relationships anyway. And so, that's all right. But I think it would have been a much more painful process the longer I stayed.
Yeah, yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Would you, and it's okay if you don't, but I'm curious, would you share like what happened to really end that relationship?
Yeah. So in a relationship, when you're anxiously attached, what can happen is that you can fall under this limiting belief, and it's kind of a smattering of multiple beliefs, probably. One of them is that, you're not really good enough to find anything else. And so if you find somebody who, in some ways feels like amazing or is desirable, especially if they're desirable to other people, you almost feel special, right? You feel like, oh, wow, like, look, this is a signal of my worth. Kind of like my job was desirable to other people. Oh, wow, this is a signal of my worth. Like it was something that was kind of recognized, right? And I think I felt that way about this relationship. And so for the sense of holding on to a feeling of worthiness, I stayed because other people, not knowing the depth and the nuance of maybe the individual that I was working in a relationship with, they didn't know that part, and so they saw something desirable on the outside, and so I stayed. I also stayed because I think I had a lot of difficulties in dating for a long time. The anxious attachment was the culprit. I had no idea though. And it kind of sounds like this. I would go on dates, I'd feel all this, anxiety and pressure to make it work, especially if I was interested for sure. I feel all this anxiety and pressure to make it work, and I put that anxiety and pressure onto them by maybe sending a little too many texts or asking for that commitment too early or whatever it looks like, right? I'm just kind of wanting to lock down that commitment. And so I didn't have a lot of success in relationships because when you put pressure on someone, they go away, they leave, which only reinforces your belief that you're not good enough. And so it just starts to become this real nasty cycle, right? So I think I stayed because of these limiting beliefs. And it was the back and forth, right? It would blow up, and we'd kind of come back together. It would blow up and we'd kind of come back together. But in the end, it was a significant enough blow up with enough, you know, I guess fallout is the word I'm looking for. And I guess I won't get into the details of what that fallout looks like, but enough fallout that it was like, okay, yeah, like this can't happen again. Unfortunately, it wasn't a peaceful ending, right? And that's what happens when you let your fear and your anxieties and your insecurities dictate the way you're going to show up in a
Mhm.
relationship, or in this case, you know, out of a relationship. Like I should have gone out of it much earlier, right? If I believed that I was worthy of better, if I believed that I could find somebody, if I just had that hope that like I'm enough, someone's going to recognize that, and the right person will be the right person at the right time, and I can trust and lean into that and relax, then man, I would have put up with way less. I would have set way more boundaries. It would have been done in the first couple months of that whole thing, and it lasted much longer than that. And so I think that's the point or the lesson that we take from that
Mhm.
is really when you let your anxiety lead, it leads you into places that are painful and that only reinforce the negative, fearful beliefs you have of yourself. Because at the end of that relationship, I remember feeling like I was just a genuine piece of garbage. Like I'm a bad guy. I'm not going to find anybody. I'm never going to find anybody like her in the ways that I liked again. And all these things that are just not true at all, but it felt so true because of the circumstances, how it blew up in my face, how it ended, the messaging that I got throughout the relationship from the other person that I wasn't a good guy was part of the narrative that I got, right? I stayed and let myself marinate in the very fearful, anxious ridden beliefs due to the relationship that hold me back. And so it was kind of one of those rock bottom things where it's like, okay, this obviously isn't working. Never even thought about trying therapy or doing any of that before. And that's where it started, right? That's where you start trying to collect bits of information, figure out where to go, listen to a podcast, go to a therapist. And it's hard because that honestly doesn't really work oftentimes because you're just grabbing random pieces and trying to organize your own healing journey. It's like, I don't know what the heck I'm doing here. But that's how it starts for many people.
Yeah. You shared so much there, and I kind of want to dig into all of it a little bit because
Yeah.
there's so many nuggets. But there's one question that came up for me that I'm curious to hear your thoughts on because you mentioned something that, like, when you have this anxious attachment and you're showing up to relationships in this way and you're putting the pressure on it, like you have a tendency to push people away, right?
Yeah.
And I'm wondering what it was about this person that she wasn't pushed away from you. And the reason I'm asking that question, I'm just
Oh,
interested to hear your
yeah.
thoughts on it, is because normally when you're operating from that place and you partner with someone from that place, that person has some benefit in kind of manipulating that part of you, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
I'm curious, what are your thoughts on that aspect of it?
Yeah, so this is a great question. So I'll talk generally because
Mhm.
it's pretty true for this situation too, but I'll talk generally about kind of how that works, right? If an anxiously attached person who doesn't believe that they're good enough and is fearful of abandonment and kind of has a bit of desperation and anxiety to feel loved, if they get into a relationship with either a fairly self-respecting, healthy individual, that's going to be a lot of pressure for that healthy individual, and they're probably going to exit. They're going to get out of there pretty quick. The more insecure the partner is, the other person is, the more likely it is that that relationship will continue at least for a season. It's going to be super chaotic and it's going to really hurt both of them, but it will probably go on for a little longer, right? Some of these didn't even turn into relationships, these dates of mine, right? Be one, two, maybe three dates in, and I'm acting like I'm their boyfriend. And it's like, no, you're not. You're their freaking boyfriend. Slow down, brother. Like, you don't have to give this cool gift or whatever else. It's overwhelming, right? And so those would just fall apart before they even became anything. And so, but what happens is that when two people that operate from kind of a similar place, which is the case here, that there's this fear of abandonment, fear of rejection. You don't necessarily trust that others are going to be there for you fully. When you get into a relationship together in the beginning, Oh, baby, it is so cool. It's like love bomb central. You're love bombing them, they're love bombing you. You're writing cute notes to each other. It's gifts. And you're like, oh my gosh, this is like a Disney movie, man. We're stoked on each other beyond belief. And that feels really, really good. And what that does is it kind of creates this anchor that in the future you find yourself saying, well, if it could just be like it was in the beginning, remember how perfect we are for each other? Remember all the chemistry? Like, I know that's inside of us. And it sounds really amazing and romantic, but really what's inside of you is insecurity. And you're just feeding it, right? It's like, I'm afraid of abandonment. Well, don't worry, I'm going to smother you so you never feel abandoned. Oh, man, I love that. I'm going to do the same to you. And so they get under this false narrative that it was chemistry, that it was love, that it was all these things. And not to say that you don't love this person too, because, right, love is something you could feel for a person instantly. And that, you know, and I guess love is a spectrum. There's different versions of it. And so I don't want to minimize that and be like, you were never in love to the people who, hear this because, did I genuinely love and care about this person? Definitely, right? Definitely, because I'm a loving human being. But was it all because it was the stars aligning and she was right and I was right and we were in the right place and we're about to ride off in the sunset? And it's like, no, that's not the case. But they get stuck in that. And they can, the this kind of a relationship is also addicting. So this is one of the reasons that we stay. And I rarely talk about this, but it's fun that we get to, is that it's so beautifully triggers and reinforces the dopamine patterns in the body. So dopamine is that chemical of drive and motivation. It's not so much the chemical of pleasure, even though we've kind of made it out to be. It's really the chemical that dumps into your system that says, like, go get more of this, or go and, well, really the message is go and escape this pain. It's the drive and motivation to escape pain primarily. And so if you're in a relationship that has a lot of highs and lows, what will happen is that when you're in the lows, and then you get that win. You get back to that lovey-dovey love bomb. Oh my gosh, we just had an amazing night. And like, I've told you that I'm sorry and it's amazing. We've made this repair. All of a sudden, you're getting that reinforcement of dopamine that says, yes, this is what we need. We need to escape into these highs. The highs, every time you make a repair after having this wicked fight and this wicked situation, it's like you're getting your drug. Oh, you become addicted to the other person because they are responsible for your happiness. How they show up for you is like that big injection of dopamine right into that system. And it's like, oh baby, this feels so good. I'm here for it. Then, where it doubles down and gets even worse, is that when reward is random, dopamine increases significantly. That's why gambling is so addicting. You don't know when you're going to get a reward. It's random, it's unpredictable. And so when you get it, there's extra doses of dopamine that dump into the system and therefore, again, reinforce the addiction. And so two people who are insecure are both giving each other essentially the drug that they need after bouts of distress at random. It has all the markers of creating an addiction. So can you be addicted to another person? Oh yeah. And it's like it's weird just call it this, but they like serve each other in this way for a
Mhm.
time, even though it's not a service because it hurts and it's chaotic and it's horrible. And then eventually it gets to the point where they don't, mutually decide to go separate ways and realize, hey, we got some differences. Most of the time, like in my case, it ends in a total wreck, right? There's flames, there's hurt feelings, and all of that, which only leaves the two individuals again with the reinforced feelings that, see, I'm not lovable, I'm not good enough. Look what happened to my relationship. They left again. But really, hold on. They didn't just leave. Like, you created that system. You created that real toxic push-pull addiction through your behavior and how you matched up with this other person who's also insecure. So,
Yeah.
in short, the reason that somebody like that would stay is because they're also insecure and they're getting benefit from it.
Yeah, and it's that, as you said, that cycle that feeds each other. You're both kind of feeding each other's addiction and chasing that reward. I think that's so insightful, so powerful. I want to I want to step back just a little bit before because I actually want to go forward into all the nuance of all of this, but I want to step back for a moment and just like for you or in the people you've worked with, where does this? So you said anxious attachment is the result of a feeling that I'm not good enough, or a fear that I'm not good enough, and a fear of abandonment. And where does that come from? Like, how does that originate in a person?
Yeah. Yeah, well, there's an experiment that was done. Uh, I want to say I can't remember around the years, but there was this experiment that was done where well, two of them. I'll mention both. There was it's the where they tested the mother's face in response to a
Hmm.
child, and I feel like this really illustrates the idea of anxious attachment pretty well. Some people think, oh, I have to have these big, horrible, abusive experiences with my family in order to feel anxiously attached, and if I don't, and if I have a good, nice, loving family, then why the heck do I feel this way? And I must just be flawed and I'm horrible and blah. And it's just like, that's the end of the story. Hold on, that's not the end of the story. In this experiment, they took a mother with their infant, and the infant was in front of the mom, and the mom was responding to the baby, smiling. If the baby pointed at something, she would look, and she's kind of interacting, giving the child signals to say, I'm connected to you, I see you, I'm here, I'm online, ready to respond to you and your needs. And then they had the mother turn away for a brief moment and turn back, stone face, no response to the baby. And the baby came not curious or disinterested, but most often they became distressed. They started to get a little bit panicky and a little bit upset. And so when we think about that and how it plays out in real life, well, I'll come to that in one second. I'll give you one more example. Then they did an experiment with monkeys, and they had this mother, what they created, a mother where they made this monkey out of like materials, but she couldn't move, right? It was a fake monkey that they built, and these monkeys would nurse off of this mother. They had bottles like in her and everything else like that, and the monkeys had much more anxiety around just things in general, right? They felt really fearful of leaving the mother. There was a lot more presentation of fear and anxiety, not being able to trust the handlers or other people because they had what they called this kind of cold mother that really didn't do anything. She didn't respond. And so if we connect this to our own histories and our own patterns, is that an angst and an anxiety in a child that is created that sounds like I don't know if I can trust that others are going to be there for me. I have to perform in order to be loved. I might not be enough just as I am, which is very similar to I have to perform to be loved. Those are the kinds of underlying feelings, if we put words to them, that an anxious child would have. They don't even have language to describe that, but it's our best attempt at being able to put into words what that is because we grow up and we still feel that way and we start to realize, wow, that's what I was feeling then, but I just didn't have the words to put to it. And it can come from simply, you think about the cold, stone-faced mom. It could be from having a parent who was anxious or depressed and was emotionally not responsive because they were so sucked into their own feelings. And you had to work really hard to make mom and dad happy. And when you made them happy, you realized like, oh, okay, they're there. Like I turned them back on, like they're back online. Instead of the secure child might grow up feeling like, oh yeah, mom and dad are like always online. They're pretty much always accessible. When I need something like comfort or, reassurance, they're going to be there. They're warm, they're inviting, they're connecting, and it can be very subtle. And obviously in cases of like abuse and so on, then clearly you're going to get the message that you're not good enough and that you can't trust the people who are supposed to provide for you. But like I said, it can be so subtle, even as, and I think this one relates to me, is taking on a family role. Like if you were the golden child, the one who seemed to be perfect all the time, then you can start to identify your value with being perfect all the time. And it can become stressful and anxiety provoking, especially if you get a lot of praise for being perfect. Good job. You're so good. We love you. You're amazing. Like a lot of that praise connected to words of affirmation and love can all of a sudden make you start to feel like kind of subconsciously, wow, my love must be contingent on me being perfect. And again, that anxiety starts to grow. It turns into this fear that others are going to leave you if you're not perfect, this feeling that like when you're not perfect, that you're unlovable, and you secretly know that you're not perfect, so you kind of always just feel unlovable. It's you can see how it comes from multiple sources, and it's usually rooted less in what happened to you and what didn't happen for you,
Mm.
right? I didn't get those soft touches. I didn't get the eye contact with mom. I didn't get a consistent, dad who was willing to work through my mistakes. He just gave me shame. Like whatever the narrative is, it's what you didn't receive more than focusing on what happened to you, as in like a direct trauma or an abuse.
Yeah, yeah. I love that explanation, and it's the still face experiments that you brought up. I actually use those videos in my program at a certain point. I think it's such a profound the imagery of that. Like when you see it in the video of this of the experiments, it's like it just
Yeah,
really highlights how dependent we are as
yeah.
children and how much like we need that, right? It's just
Mhm.
and something I was thinking as you were talking is given that we are that sensitive and that dependent as children, and I imagine like so many people just don't get that, right? So what I was going to ask you is like in your experience, how common is this? Some form, and I know some people might be more anxious, some
Oh,
people might be more avoidant, but how
yeah,
common
yeah.
is this, these attachment wounds?
Oh man, it's so common. It's insane. Like I feel like yeah, most everybody that you meet has some form of an attachment wound because guess what? We have humans as parents. They're, it's not even like we have bad parents or anything like that. Like maybe your parents immigrated from somewhere and they were just busting their butts every day just to try to keep food on the table, and you didn't get as many warm touches, right? It's like there's so many ways that this could happen. And I think that's one of the powerful pieces, in our work. I run this group called the Secure Self Club, and we work together to go from anxiously attached to secure. And part of that work is kind of dissecting your past and looking for what we call influencing factors, as far as like what's influenced this anxiety within me. And really, people are very surprised, like, oh man, I thought I had like an amazing childhood, which I still did, and I didn't think there was really anything in there that could explain why I feel the way I do. But like we're talking about here, it can be so subtle, it can be pretty nuanced. And so if you feel like, yeah, I've kind of got a few of those, you're definitely not alone. I would venture to say that the majority of us have a bit of that at some level.
Yeah, and I mean, I would absolutely agree with that. It's how could we not, right? Growing up on planet Earth. At what level? So, given that probably everybody has this to some degree, at what level is it problematic? And how could somebody determine if it was problematic or not?
Good question. So the first level of it being problematic is your internal experience is unpleasant. And I say just unpleasant is like a general term. Like there's consistent distress, and you decide like at what point is this too much, right? If you're like, oh, I can feel pretty anxious about social situations or relationships, or if I'm good enough, maybe, once a week, and I'm okay with that. Okay, then maybe it's not problematic. Maybe that's cool for you. If somebody else is like, no, I don't really want to feel that way once a week, that's a lot, then that's problematic for you. I would say definitely if it seems to be a consistent theme, like daily, it's affecting your mood, where you're always worried about what other people are thinking of you. You're always stressing about people pleasing and making everybody happy, right? We're talking about kind of some of the, I guess you could call them symptoms of this feeling. But then, yeah, that's probably problematic because it's robbing you of your peace, your daily sense of peace. Like, that's a big deal. And then on the outward, where it becomes problematic is where you see it eroding your relationships or your career. Most people see it in their relationships because it's heightened in intimate relationships. Somebody can feel totally confident in a professional setting and feel totally not confident in a dating or romantic partner type of relationship. And how we see that happen is that I'll give you a couple examples so people can kind of really tangibly hold on to this. If you have this fear that others are going to leave and that you're not quite good enough, then when your partner does something that maybe isn't a violation of, you know, it's not really maybe they unintentionally came home late, for example. Let's say they got pulled over or something benign happened. Your interpretation of it is that it has something to do with them not loving you, that they're leaving you. And it's not even conscious oftentimes, it's subconscious. It's just this feeling and this anxiety that like they don't prioritize you, they don't care about you. That narrative is going through your head, and it's really based in fear and hurt, but it escalates into things like hypervigilance, like always asking your partner for reassurance. Hey, tell me that you love me. I want to know, like blah, blah, blah. And that kind of wears them out, and that can deteriorate a relationship. Or it can escalate into anger and criticism. You don't prioritize me. You weren't home late. You're always home late. You this and that. And now I'm pointing out all the ways that you fail. And as I point out all the ways that you fail, you feel like a failure. And the more you feel like a failure, the more your partner feels like a failure is what we're talking about here. The more your partner feels like a failure, the more, if they're avoidant, they're going to withdraw. They're like, oh man, this sucks. Like I'm in the firing lane. I can't do this. This hurts. I got to get out of here. And so they're going to withdraw. And as they withdraw, you feel more like they're abandoning you, and it just keeps going and it doubles down and it stokes the fire. So things like criticism, being extra clingy in dating, asking for commitment really early in relationships, maybe manipulating others to get close to you, like manipulating them to feel bad for you, or people pleasing is a big one where you start sacrificing your own needs, your values, the things you want in life to make sure everybody else is happy so they stay close. Well, that's problematic because you're going to become resentful and you're not going to have the things that you need in your relationships. And so those are a few examples of where this starts to become problematic, and it's like, okay, we got to do something to interrupt this so that you can have a great life, so you can have a fulfilling life that doesn't involve all these challenges that are created from this internal anxious part of self.
Yeah. Do you think there are a lot of people who are experiencing these problems that you're describing here, but are not even aware that they have a problem? Like they're going through their lives like, oh no, I'm good, but meanwhile all of this stuff is happening and they just don't see it.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I was that guy for a while. I mean, I knew I
Yeah.
wasn't having success in relationships and stuff. And for me, it looked like this. Like I knew there was some sort of issue, but I didn't realize like where to start or what to point it at, right? I would go on dates and they didn't go through. There was a lot of ghosting from women. There was a lot of, just real challenges in that. And I remember being like, wait a second, on paper, like I've got a lot to offer. I'm a nice dude. I mean, I'm half decent in my appearance. I take care of myself at least. I've got a good career. Like it seems like I've got the things that would be on the list. If girls made a list of like what they want in a guy, I feel like I've got like a good amount of them. And I was scratching my head going, then why? Then why does this never work? And it's so funny because consciously, I recognized that I had a resume of things that were probably attractive, but underneath, kind of in that subconscious zone, I really just didn't believe that I was good enough. There was some shame there. There was some, anxiety there. And it was like this magical mystery. Like, why is it that some people succeed in their relationships and I don't? I don't get it. And, and this points to my insecurity. I was even so insecure that I would point at other guys who I thought maybe, and again, this is so shallow and insecure, but I thought, man, that I look way better than that dude. I'm a much more handsome bloke than that guy. It's so cringy to even say that I thought that, but I did. And I would think that, and I would be like, why in the world is he successful in dating? Like, I don't get this. What I didn't realize is that maybe that guy had deep confidence that had nothing to do with how he looked. And
Mhm.
that confidence exuded safety. And that's another thing. It's like when you are confident, people around you, they just feel safe. They feel at home. They're like, oh, you're not looking over your shoulder worried and anxious and on edge. Like, I feel okay and I feel comfortable with you. And I don't think I gave that vibe off. And I didn't know it until I had to figure it out.
Yeah. I think it's so profound what you're saying because, like, kind of the go to thing when people are struggling to find a partner or to, succeed in relationships. I think like one of the most go-to things, and maybe more so for women, but I think it's for men too, is like trying to make ourselves look more attractive, right? Oh, I must not be attractive enough. Or,
Right.
oh, I need to make more money, or I need to be more successful in some kind of external domain. And I think a lot of men are more like, oh, if I make more money, women will want me. But there are a lot of men who make a lot of money and can't get a woman to pay attention to them,
Yeah.
right? Yeah.
Yeah.
And so it's so interesting what you're saying is that like the external things really, I mean, I'm not going to say they don't matter, but
Right.
they're not really what it's about. And I think so many of us, it's easy to try to improve it's easier to try to improve the external than it is to really look internally and say, what is it I need to do differently?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so what is it that a person in that situation needs to do differently?
Well, here's the thing. We could go on behavioral level, which is like, okay, stop being so clingy and stuff like that, right? We could look at the actual behavior because there's protective behaviors, is what I call them, where you are protecting yourself from abandonment, for example, by maybe asking for commitment really early in a relationship, texting them a lot, trying to keep their attention, or pointing out what your partner's doing wrong so that they'll correct and give you the love that you need to not feel abandoned. There's all these protective mechanisms, and what you could do is you could map out this cycle, and this is part of the work that we do within our group. We map out the cycle, and from there we can look at like, oh, that's the protective behavior, and sometimes it's as simple as when you feel the urge to do that, don't, right? But that's not terribly therapeutic. It only goes so far and it's not very sustainable, right? That leads to like a lot of what we call like white knuckling it, where you're just like holding on. You're like, oh my gosh, I just want to text her so bad right now. It's 3 in the morning and I need reassurance. But I'm not going to do it. And eventually, the stress of trying not to do it becomes overwhelming in itself. So that's not a long-term solution, but it is a good start at least to know where you're at. Like, hey, stop doing this and start doing that. But really, if we want to get after this, oh, let's go one layer deeper because those protective behaviors, they're just symptoms. They're not actually the problem. They are not at all. They're an attempted solution to deal with the problem. The real problem is this internal fear or anxiety that sounds like I'm not good enough. I got to be perfect to be loved. Others are going to leave me. Usually it's one of those kind of things, right? And it's like consciously, you might not actually believe those things all the time. Maybe you do, right? Some people do as well. But there might be a part of you that's like, well, I don't know if I fully believe all that stuff, but your emotions respond differently. And that makes a lot of sense because guess what? It's usually a deeper emotional part of you that was created in your history that needs some healing. And so that healing looks like giving yourself, and this is going to get a little nuanced and maybe hard to hold on to. I have a free little seminar that helps kind of explain it a little bit more in depth. But it's this idea that if you want to experience emotional healing, you have to have an emotional experience because you were wounded through emotional experiences. Mom and dad maybe weren't there for you. They didn't show up to your games. They were escalated and angry. There's so many versions of emotional experiences that created that wound that sounds like the negative beliefs. And so, in order to heal it, you need new corrective emotional experiences. And that's a lot of the work that we do with our group and with our clients is to help facilitate experiences that help correct the underlying fears and underlying negative beliefs so that you no longer, so you just naturally start showing up in healthy ways. You don't have to tell yourself, hey, don't do this and do that. You just kind of do it by nature because you're feeling much more secure.
What's an example of a new corrective emotional experience? Like, how would
Yeah.
somebody create that?
Yeah, great. So, for example, maybe you, up to this point, have seen your anxiety as this problem, and maybe you shame it, right? As if it's like a part of you, and you're like, oh, I hate that I feel this way, and I'm such a freaking simp, and I'm the worst, and like, you're getting down on yourself about this anxiety. You've got this negative relationship almost like with the anxiety. And so what a corrective emotional experience could look like is A, understanding, wait a second, that anxiety is actually like, well, we kind of embody it as like the inner child, right? It's like that internal representation of a time when I was younger, when I was hurt, when I felt alone, and that little version of me still lives there inside of me, which is actually true. This is wild. You think about it, you have experiences and you have neurons in your brain that wire together. And when they wire together, they have to be unwired somehow. So you literally have a physical representation of your inner child living within you. It's just how you were, quite frankly, wired through experiences. This is the nurture side of things, right? And so you have this bit of you. And so sometimes it looks like approaching that part of you, instead of seeing it as this anxiety that's the problem, taking time to visualize it as this scared little child that maybe at 6 years old, was smaller than all the rest of the kids and got bullied. And then when he tried to tell mom about it, she was like, yeah, not a big deal. I've got more important things to do, or whatever it is. Like going kind of visually into your mind and into your body and kind of notice the feelings and addressing that part with some compassion, right? I used to have pictures of my younger self all over my mirror when I was doing my work. And I would look at little Trevor and I'd be like, buddy, I love you. Like, I'm so sorry that you had to feel that way when you felt that way. I'm going to take care of you now, right? I became the loving, nurturing adult. And I know it sounds a little crazy because it sounds like I'm talking as if you've got multiple people in you. And I'm not saying you're schizophrenic or multiple personality or anything like that. I'm just saying it helps us to keep track of this experience and make it make sense when we address it as if it's a part of us. So I would address that part of me. And you know what happened? Is like I just felt that internal trust, right? All of my parts, my inner child pieces of me, the anxious piece, the piece that I didn't believe I was good enough, they started to trust Trevor, the adult self, the one who knows how to scoop up a kid and love him, the one who is a good uncle to his nieces and nephews, the one who now is a loving dad, as much as I possibly can be, I try to do. All right. It's like I have the ability to give that love to that wounded part of myself. And so I'm going to give that love, speaking out loud to it, visualizing it, seeing it on your mirror, right? And I know it's kind of, I'm giving you vague kind of top level ideas. It's hard to really describe it until you actually get into the weeds and you do the work. And that's really where having someone guide you through it is incredibly helpful.
Yeah, no, I mean, it makes a lot of sense, and I think I've experienced a lot of very similar things in my work where that is the that is the solution, right? Is to nurture these kind of frantic parts of ourselves that are
Yeah.
afraid of everything, and
Yeah.
and so on in that light, I want to ask you one other thing, because you've now made like a 180 transformation, right? You were there, and now you're with a partner, or you're a father, so
Right.
you
Right.
exited that relationship that we started with, and you found your way into the
Yeah.
kind of relationship that I think probably most of the people who are listening to this would want for themselves, or to some degree.
Yeah. Yeah.
What what did you need to do aside from just, kind of what you just said about, healing your inner child and things like that? But what were the practical steps that you took to create what you have now?
Yeah, so I'll tell you a few of them. One is I just needed more of a community than individual therapy was providing. It's hard to heal on your own, especially an attachment related challenge, because you think about this, attachment wounds are created in relationship to others, and they are best healed in relationship to others. So when you're able to connect with other people in deep and meaningful ways, especially if they're on like a similar or the same journey as you, that's incredibly healing. For me, it was really hard because I had to kind of create that for myself. I couldn't find it anywhere, right? That's part of why, we have the club. It's like, well, we want to make it so you don't have to find it. And so finding community is paramount. It 10x's your healing. I feel like it accelerates the speed significantly, especially around these attachment related challenges. And then number two is I feel like I also needed more structure, plan, and direction than than I was necessarily getting in therapy at the time. Because I don't know if, I bet a lot of people resonate with this, where you kind of collect sound bites off of social media that you save, but you literally never watch again, or you think it's really cool, but you don't really go back and implement it, or you don't really know how. You read this book, you listen to this podcast, and it's kind of like everything is everywhere and there's no like real structure and real plan. But when I was able to create more of a structure, more of a plan, that significantly helped me because I could see where I was going. I could kind of track my progress. But it's a hard thing to do, right? A lot of even some of this healing happened in my master's degree when I was studying these things professionally, right? I think healing is a lifetime, but that's really where I started to build out a structure that helped me to round out that healing and actually see it like take hold, right? And then I think another piece is just repetition. You need a lot more repetition than something like weekly therapy or weekly coaching provides because your life keeps going between those sessions. It's not like you just turn it off all of a sudden. You need to be able to, if you've spent your whole life telling yourself that you're not good enough or having experiences that reinforce the belief that you're not good enough, dude, that's a lot of reps. That's a lot of reps in the wrong direction. And so we need to give you repetition in the right direction. I think that's one of the challenges that people have is they try to go for variety. I'm going to listen to every podcast and every this and every that. It's like, no, 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 no. Find a handful of things that work for you, that are powerful, and repeat them. Go back to them over and over again. Daily rituals, daily habits, routines that rewire through reinforcement the pathways in your brain. So those are a few of the practical kind of elements of healing that I would suggest people do. And I go more in depth on those specific ones. There's a free seminar called From Anxious to Secure that I explain this, and it's just all four of those elements. We kind of go into the nuance of each of them and give you an idea of like, okay, how do you find all four of those and incorporate them into your healing? Because it's kind of a tall order to get community, repetition, structure, um, and also the fourth, I guess we mentioned earlier, that emotional experience that you need in order to heal.
Yeah, yeah. And we'll make sure to leave the links to those seminars and things in the show
Yeah,
notes for anyone who wants to check them out. Um,
yeah,
you mentioned like rituals and practices and things that you can repeat regularly. What were some of those for you?
yeah. And here's the thing: they changed a little bit. You know, it's funny. I was actually just teaching my group about this because they were setting up their kind of what we call dailies, kind of some daily habits. And I think the anxiously attached get into the mindset of like, oh, I have to do these every day. It's like this 75 hard challenge kind of mindset, like grind, 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 go, go, go. And if you miss it, then you're a failure. And it's like we were working through some of the emotion that comes behind setting up a daily routine or daily habits. And so I guess I'm answering a little bit of a different question, but I'll answer yours as well. But I think the mindset first around some sort of daily ritual or habits, it's is more important than my specific examples because each person is going to be different. And the goal is to create an internal sense of safety, right? Security comes from feeling safe with me and my world. I feel good in my skin. I feel good in my body. I feel good in my mind. I've created a life where I can feel safe and comfortable and secure. So I don't have to rely on others to create that for me. Can they influence it? Can they make it more safe, more amazing? Oh yeah, they can, and they better if they're going to be in a relationship with you. You got to find people who are willing to participate in building out that loving, safe life for you. But it's all about first creating it for yourself. So it looks like identifying little activities, little practices that help you connect with yourself and feel safe, right? It might look like standing outside for a few moments with your face to the sun and just like enjoying the warmth that comes from that, mixing up your day in that way. It might look like going on that walk that you go on no matter what, right? That one's cool because there's some neuroscience involved in that. When you walk, the optic flow of items passing by your eyes actually calms down your amygdala in your brain, which is the fear center. We found from research that quite frankly, optic flow actually helps to calm the body. So that's why walking is oftentimes part of people's dailies. They're like, I feel good, and I don't know why. It's like, well, because we're just soothing your little amygdala in there, and it's all cozy and comfy, and it's not worried about what's going on in the outside world. So there's a handful of things you can do. I think connecting with your higher power For me, that's called God. Spending time in meditation, in prayer, spending time, reading things that uplift you and fill your mind with meaning and purpose. There's all sorts of rituals that can be plugged in, but being able to find ones that you're like, okay, this is sustainable. I could do it every single day, and then choosing to do them every day to the point where you no longer think about it. It's no longer a choice. You're just like, yeah, I just go on my walk, no matter what, no matter what it's like outside. I just go on my walk, or I do my reading, and I have my time in prayer, and you just make it kind of a default blessing to yourself, a way you take care of yourself daily.
Yeah. And what I'm taking from that, and I appreciate the examples because it really kind of, I think, frames what it is that people need. But what I'm taking from it is that you find something that makes you feel safe, that makes you feel whole, that makes you feel good in your own skin, and you
Mhm.
work that into your life consistently. And when you do that, when every day you go for your walk or you meditate or you read or whatever it is, when you're consistently having those habits and those routines that make you feel safe, you're rewiring those that network in your brain that is so used to not feeling safe. And so you're actually
Yep.
getting comfortable and familiar with the experience of feeling safe.
Yeah. Can you imagine if like you walk into, let's say, a date and you normally that's triggering or something of maybe just going on a date's triggering. Maybe like something happens that's triggering and you already come in with a baseline of feeling safe. I'm going to guess that trigger is going to be a lot less impactful. You're less likely to respond in a way that's disruptive to you, the other person, your date, like whatever. You might still feel it a little bit, like, oh man, there's like that old feeling right there. I still feel it, but you're going to be able to manage that much better because you're just at a better baseline.
Yeah. And even after the date, maybe you come home and you're like, okay, are they going to call me? Am I going to hear from them or whatever? But
Yeah,
again, it'll be easier for you to find that safe place. Or when you're like, I want to text
exactly.
them, 300 times right now, but it's like, no, I have access to that safe place now where before I didn't necessarily have it.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. For me, I will say one of the things is also creating a physical environment that feels incredibly safe. I would, I spent some time, and some guys in particular don't really focus on this as much as maybe girls do, I think, is I created a room that visually looked very nice and very calming. Like, man, I was like lighting my candles. I had my Alexa and she like had this nice song she would play when I would get home. Like my GPS location would like cue it up. Like I had plants. I had nice, like clean white bedspread. I just created a zone that when I came home, it just wasn't just a home. It was like, oh yeah, this is healing right here. And it got real specific. What scents make me feel the best? Not which ones do I like, but which ones do I emotionally, feel that kind of um, without it even being woo woo, it's just like that positive energy that comes from it, right?
Mhm.
It's if I hold my phone during an interaction, I have a distracted energy no matter what, even if I'm not looking at it, I feel a bit distracted. Or if I'm sitting here with my hands on my lap, I feel focused, right? That's a simple, tiny shift, but I would look for what things can I incorporate into my environment that lead towards the energy that I want to have in my life. And man, that I think was also paramount. There's a piano player named Paul Cardall. He does like hymns and like kind of religious type music, but it's all just instrumental. So even if you're not religious, man, it's good stuff because there's no words or anything to it. And so soothing, man. I would listen to Paul Cardall all the time, all of the time in my room, in that place as I would like pray. And I'm a little bit jealous of my single self right now because, man, I don't get that quite as much now. I'm like wrestling a 1-year-old and he's screaming, I'm trying to get into bed. But yeah, I would encourage creating an environment of safety.
Yeah, I think that makes so much sense, and it's so simple, but I think that's a level of like self-care and self-love and attentiveness that most people just don't give to themselves, right? Like most people were, and especially going back to something you mentioned earlier, when we're so focused on what do I have to do to get others to like me? What do I have to do for acceptance? Or, it's like really giving that attention and care and love to ourselves is often overlooked. And so I think it's a whole,
Yeah.
there's kind of a symbology in that where in taking the attention that you've been given to everyone else and starting to really be present to and giving that to yourself,
Yep.
that would be healing, right? Because your energy that's been out there everywhere, scattered and frantic, and it's now being brought back into yourself. And I think that in and of itself creates a degree of security.
It really does. And on top of just helping to regulate your nervous system and things we're talking about here, when when you do this, you're constantly sending yourself a message either that you don't matter or that you do matter. I
Hmm.
used the example the other day on my story. I was on a podcast like this, and I told the host, I said, I've got a firm cutoff at this time. And they were like, okay. And I said, I've got something on my schedule. And what was on my schedule was just to go eat at my favorite little fish and chip spot across the street and go jump in the ocean because we're really close to the ocean here as like my little break. And it wasn't that I had an appointment with a client or like some like important, quote unquote important thing to do, but I deemed that being with myself and taking care of myself was just as important as anything. It was important to call out a hard cutoff on this show that we were on. And I say when you don't do things like keep appointments with yourself, you send yourself the subconscious message that you don't matter. And when you do keep your appointment with yourself or create a beautiful environment for you to live in or whatever else it is, you reinforce the message that you do matter. And it's really, really simple. There's no like crazy trickery, there's no mind bending, whatever. Just treat yourself better and you're gonna start feeling better about you.
Yeah. And you'll start demanding better treatment from others too, right?
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
Yeah.
And it might be comfortable if you're like used to being the people-pleasing, self-sacrificing individual, you treating yourself better and prioritizing you is going to feel so uncomfortable and really maybe even scary because you've been prioritizing everybody else's needs as a way of protecting yourself from this perceived abandonment that may or may not even be real. And so all of a sudden, if you let go of that, that's pretty terrifying. So sometimes it does require some of this kind of internal healing work that we talked about earlier in order to access the ability to, let yourself be and treat yourself well. It just kind of depends on how much of an emotional barrier there is to taking care of yourself.
Yeah. No, that makes a lot of sense. I think it's very, simple but profound. And I mean, I agree that it would be very, for somebody who doesn't have that habit, it would be a very challenging habit to build, possibly, right? To withdraw our energy from everyone and everything else and start to really give it to ourselves.
Yes.
So, is there anything maybe we haven't touched on yet that you would like to share before we close?
Oh man, I appreciate the opportunity. No, I think the only thing I always think is really important to give people is that is so many times I receive messages like on Instagram or wherever else, and they're like, "Can you actually change this?" Because I think the way we've talked about attachment styles
Hmm.
is that it's like what you're born with, like your height, and it's like it's just what you have. And people are shocked to think that you can actually change it. You can't really change your height very well. We haven't invented a good enough plastic surgery for that one. Hopefully, we don't. That would be a little scary. But anyway, but you can change your attachment styles. You can change the way you see yourself. You can increase that sense of internal peace, internal trust, so that you show up as a confident, whole individual. I know it is true. I know it's true because I have done it. I know it is true because I've helped so many people to do it. And they are not, I mean, everyone's extraordinary, but at the same time, everyone is ordinary. And they are ordinary people that don't have some sort of special magical wand or little gift that they were given that you just don't have. They're pretty much just like almost everybody else that we meet when we're all pretty normal. And so I guess leaving people with a bit of a sense of hope that, oh yeah, you got this. If you're resonating with this, you're like, I want to change this in my life. Great, you can. Congrats. I'm glad you found this. Like you can now do it.
Yeah. Beautiful, beautiful. That's a great message to end on. How do you work with people? What are the opportunities you have, and where can people find you?
Yeah, so I would say the best first place for us to, I always think like, hey, build build a relationship and build trust with whoever you want to work with or whoever you're looking to work with. So you've already been doing a little bit of that. If you're listening to this, hopefully that feels good. And if you're like, hey, I want a quote unquote second date with Trevor, go check out one of my free seminars, right? It's like, let's continue to build that trust and see if I am the right fit to help you. But ultimately, where we shine is in our ability to help people go from anxious to secure. And the Secure Self Club is what we've created to do that. It's a program that involves a unique model, an approach called the Secure Self Journey to help you accomplish that goal. And again, that's all we're focused on is going from anxious to secure. You get an individual coach who works with you. There's group coaching along the way and some other additional resources to really create an ecosystem and an environment for healing anxious attachment. And there's, the best way of learning about that would just be to jump on a call with one of the members of my team who can kind of give you more information. On that call, our purpose is just to figure out if you would be a good fit for our program. And the reason I say that is because it's invite only, just because we only want to bring people in who we feel really confident that we can help, right? It's like understanding what your problem is, what you've done to try to solve it, why it's not working. Questions like that help us to know if it would make sense to extend that invitation. And so if you'd like to be part of that, I would say go to primarily first just my Instagram. The Art of Healing by Trevor is the handle there. You can also go to theartofhealingbytrevor.com. If you're on my social media platforms, the link in my bio there at the top should be my free seminar from anxious to secure. You can watch that. Or usually it's the link right below that is a link directly to the page that can teach you more about the Secure Self Club. And I'm sure you'll probably link these in the show notes as well, so people could probably just make it easy on themselves and do that.
Yeah, so we'll definitely make sure to link your Instagram, your free webinars, the Secure Self Club, and anything else you want. So for those of you who are listening, look right below this in the show notes, and you'll find links for everything Trevor's talking about. Thanks for being on today. It's been wonderful. I think you've shared some really profound and insightful stuff, and I know the audience is going to really enjoy and appreciate it. So thank you so much, Trevor.
Oh, thank you so much.
Thanks again for checking out the show. Please subscribe on whatever platform you listen to podcasts on the most. And I would love it so much if you leave a review and tell people what you think of us. Don't forget to follow us on Instagram @TheLivingRelationship to connect more closely. And I'm grateful to be supporting you on your journey to love.